The Duke in Measure for Measure, in many ways, suits the ideology, or is maybe a model of the ideology of monarchy that King James actually promoted at the time. We routinely talk about Shakespeare's an Elizabethan, and his career did begin in Elizabeth's reign. She was queen for 45 years, and Shakespeare, was around for the last, and Shakespeare's born like 6 years into the reign. His career starts about 15 or so years before she passes away. But he's also a Jacobean, someone who lives under the reign of King James I, aka King James VI of Scotland. The last decade of Shakespeare's career is under this other monarch, um, and in a world with changing fashions. This is a very Jacobean play in a couple of ways. First, it imagines a king who is above everybody else, and here is imagined as a kind of surveillance king. People have noted, sometimes uncomfortably, the Duke here takes the old kind of folklore trope of the kind of disguised monarch going around to see how his people really rule. The sense that that the king, the duke, the emperor, whoever doesn't get good information because of all the sycophants, all the yes men. So you've got to go off in disguise, and it's the undercover boss principle of monarchy. But many critics have said it's a little tricky because this is someone who's manipulative. He's an unseen hand. Um, the duke is more comforting if you take for granted, as King James most certainly did, that the monarch knows best and that something is right because the monarch decides it. I don't know about you, but I live in the 21st century in a country that dispensed with the monarchy almost 250 years ago. So I don't always concede the monarch knows best. And some people become critics who become more attuned to issues of, say, surveillance, find the secret monarch trope creepy, especially as secret as this person is. I will also point out that because this duke, is disguised as a friar, he's apparently hearing confessions, though he's not entitled to do that. So people are telling him his secrets under the Catholic principle that your confessor, the priest who hears your confession, is bound to secrecy. But and can absolve you of your sins through like ceremonial, through sacramental, the sacraments that Catholic priests do. But this is a fake friar who can't perform the sacrament of absolution and who isn't bound to secrecy. That's actually in some ways very, very bad. So there's something here where Shakespeare is thinking through, maybe uneasily, something about the kind of model of absolute monarchical power that King James promotes. I'll also say as an aside, if you haven't noticed yet, friars in Shakespeare's plays tend to be a little suspect. Just like friars come up with crazy plans, like, "Hey, I have this drug that can put you in a coma for 2 days." Why would Catholic clergy do that? And the sneaky plan in Much Ado About Nothing, a friar comes up with these cunning plans. They're not super evil in Shakespeare, but there is a sense that friars are a little stealthy. There's some kind of espionage thing going on there. You have to remember, at this point, Shakespeare's England is officially Protestant, and there's a whole bunch of people who are kind of sentimentally Catholic out in the provinces and some in London. And there are undercover Catholic clergy infiltrating England kind of as spies planning to overthrow the government, though the Catholic population doesn't really seem to be about overthrowing the government, but through these Catholic activists who are. So the idea that friars can be up to elaborate plans is also part of the kind of Elizabethan and Jacobean worldview. Not for nothing, one day a Catholic activist named Guy Fawkes decided to put a lot of gunpowder under Parliament to blow up Parliament and King James. So that would be your Christian versus Christian religious terrorism in action. This play is also Jacobean in another way. If it seems dark and cynical, fashions of comedy were changing in this period. We think of Shakespeare often. We're told, especially in high school, to think of him as standing alone, responsible to no one but his genius. But he's a working artist and a businessman who's writing for money for his theater troupe and wants them to do well, who is responsive to changing fashions. And there are moments in his career when he's kind of setting the fashion, other moments where he tends to follow it more, maybe, than we often like to admit. By 1606 or so, there's a younger generation of very hip, fashionable playwrights who kind of cater to the upscale audience, and who write much more kind of cynical comedy. Shakespeare is here showing us that he can play that game too. He's not totally imitating his junior colleagues, but he is showing us that he can absorb and do something with the things they're kind of do, that he can respond to changing styles and fashions in the theater. As it is, this is probably the last comedy that Shakespeare writes for a while. He takes a short break from it. Next time we see him write a comedy, it will be a romance. What is romance? There'll be a video about that. A romance is also a comedy. It's just it's it's one in which Shakespeare absorbs yet another set of changing fashions, moves into something called tragic comedy. This is a kind of dark and cynical comedy. Next time, the next thing on our list, we will see Shakespeare near the end of his career moving towards the complicated genre of tragic comedy.